A couple of quick notes before we get started. I have access to the chat, so if you have questions as we go, feel free to type those in, and I will try to answer them as we go through it. If it's something that's going to be covered later on, I might wait to discuss that until later. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. We have a full agenda for today. I think if I remember correctly to last year, which was the first time we ever did this, I think we did end a little bit early. We'll see how fast we go through things today. So we'll do just a welcome, and I'll go over the other people that are going to cover, that are going to speak today. Then we'll start with an overview and talk about inscat general. We'll then switch to the alternate assessment and talk a little bit about accessibility. Then we'll take about a 10-minute break just to make sure anybody needs to use the restroom, you need to get up, stretch your legs, whatever the case may be. After we come back from that break, we'll talk about ACT, and Iris Owens will be presenting that. Then Rhonda True will be presenting about NAEP and the skills grant. The skills grant is a science assessment grant that we have, and she has some good material there that you might find useful. Then Allison Olson will be in to talk about ELPA 21, and then we'll do an extended question and answer session. But like I said, if you have questions as we go, please submit those through chat, and we'll try to respond as we go through that. Like I said, we'll record and post this, the recording and all of the PowerPoints as well, so that you have access to those. So with me so far today, so we're going to have people coming in and out for today. Along with me so far is Dr. Trudy Clark, who is the Assistant Director of Statewide Assessment, and Iris Owens. Iris takes care of all things ACT here at NDE. She's actually an ACT employee, which we don't hold against her, but she is great and answers and takes care of a lot of the ACT pieces that we have going. So talk a little bit about our objectives with this, and this is really intended for new DACs. I looked at the attendance list, and I saw there's some experienced people on here, and that's fine. We're glad that you're here. And Iris pointed out that maybe you're training somebody new and you're getting ready to hand the reins over to somebody else. But in general, we'll try to explain important context for the statewide assessment activity. So I'll go over a little bit about some of the whys we do what we do, just so you have that information. Really want to give you a broad overview of the programs and the supports that we offer from the Statewide Assessment Office. We're not going to get into very deep details on any one particular thing, but we want to help you understand the broader context of what we do and what we offer. We'll examine an overview of DAC responsibilities. There are big responsibilities as DACs. We know that, but we also know that it's only probably a small part of what you have to do every day in your district. And so we want to make sure that you have that overview so you can attend to those as you need to, but they don't take up all of your time, because we know you have other things to do. Probably one of the most important things about this session is to really review the resources that you have available to you. Not only resources here at the department, but resources from each of the vendors as well. We've tried to put in a lot of resources, a lot of places to find information. One of the biggest things for me, having been a DAC previously, and having been at the department now for a while, we really want to be a resource for you. So if you have questions, we want you to ask those questions. Give us a call, send us an email. We will get back to you as quickly as possible. we do want you to read all the materials we send out, all the emails and all of those things. But we also know that as you're busy in your schools, that if you're looking for the answer for something, we don't want you to spend, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, even, those types of things, looking for an answer when you could easily call us and get the answer, because we know that your time is valuable. We would rather have you spending that time doing student things that are beneficial for students as opposed to searching for an answer to an assessment question. And so we'll go over those resources today, both people resources and places to find information. What I would say in general is never hesitate to call us or contact us. We never hold that against anybody. We'd rather you contact us and ask us a question as opposed to getting something wrong, because when something gets wrong, then oftentimes it requires additional work on both your and our parts. And so it's better if we get it right the first time. And if you have questions, please let us know. So talk a little bit about the philosophy here. Many of us in the office have been in Nebraska districts, have worked as DACs, have worked as superintendents in some cases, and as a district, I was a curriculum director, for instance, and my wife continues to be a principal, so I get to hear about all of the things every day if we mess them up. So we try to be in tune with what's going on. And we care about the students and the teachers in the state of Nebraska. So really our first mission is to serve the students, educators, and districts of the state of Nebraska. We really do keep that at the forefront of our mind. You might not think so with all of the decisions we make, but they're made with that in mind all the time. The other thing that I'd say, and I say this often, but our job in the statewide assessment office, in my view, is to make the laws and policies be the most beneficial and the least disruptive as possible. That doesn't mean they're not going to be disruptive, and that doesn't mean they're always going to be beneficial, but we're going to make them the most beneficial and the least disruptive as possible as we're making the best decisions that we can in the context of everything we have to do. So we're really trying to offer resources and supports that assist districts in developing and maintaining a balanced assessment system. We believe in the power of assessments to have positive impacts on student learning, on school improvement, but that means that we all have to use them correctly. And so what we're trying to do is offer those resources to districts so that they can fulfill that. We cannot, at the department, we can't create a balanced assessment system. We can create supports for a balanced assessment system. It's up to districts to use those supports in ways that benefit their districts and their students and their teachers. And so also we're trying to fulfill the mission and vision of the State Board of Education and NDE to make sure that we're serving and benefiting teachers, students, districts in the state of Nebraska. Some other parameters that we use as we're trying to make decisions, right? So what is best for all students? And that gets a little bit, at the department, we started talking about what is best for each student. What I'd say in assessment is sometimes we have to make decisions that are best for all students, and trying to make fair and equitable decisions for educators and districts. Because our assessments are used for accountability, it's really important that we make fair and equitable decisions across the board. And really we're looking for consistency over time, right? It is to make sure that we're making the same decision for every district, no matter how long that DAC has been in place, no matter how long or how much power that district may wield. We're trying to make equitable and fair decisions across the board. And that's something that we do all the time. And sometimes what I would say is that sometimes that ignores an individual student and the empathy we have for an individual student, but we're also trying to be fair and equitable to school districts. And so, like I said, you won't always like the decisions we make, but we're trying to make the best decisions we can, and hopefully you can respect that tension that we have in the work that we do. We also have a obligation to make sure we have technical quality in all of our assessments. The federal government comes in and looks at the technical quality. You would expect us to have high quality assessments, that they are that they perform the way that they're supposed to, and that they're fair and equitable to the students that take them, and then the scores are used in fair and equitable ways as well. And so we sometimes we have to make decisions that maybe don't make a lot of sense from the outside, but they are meant to ensure that technical quality is happening. This is a piece here. So of course, we're trying to make sure we're following all federal and state statutes and guidance, including the purposes described in law. So we're trying to make sure that we adhere to those, and we're not running afoul of either the state or the federal laws that dictate a statewide assessment and how we go about things. Sometimes the answer is easy, is that's because that's what the law says. And so, but we also will do the best we can within that law to make it, like I said, the most beneficial and the least disruptive as possible. I'm not going to read these to you, but I always think that it's instructive a little bit to look back at the purposes of statewide assessment. If you've been around long enough to see the STARS era end and the NISA or the statewide testing era begin, you might know this, but in the law that created statewide assessment, the unicameral outlined 4 different reasons why we will have statewide assessment. If you look at these reasons, and the first thing I always ask people is to notice what's not there. Students is only mentioned one time. Teachers aren't mentioned at all. There's no mention of growth. There's no mention of improvement. It really was, the law was all about comparison of schools and making sure schools, they're seeing which schools were doing better and which schools were doing worse, in totality. That really is opposite of what most educators would want from assessment. And so we've been busily trying to make sure that we fulfill the obligations in the law, but also going beyond that. This is what I would say is the law says what we have to do. We try to go beyond that and get to what we get to do, and trying to make sure that we support that. So if you look at the assessment tenet of AQuest, it really allowed us or put forth a vision that we would try to support balanced assessment better, not only support and do the summative assessments that we have to do and are important and have value, but also trying to make sure we support other types of assessment that can be used for instructional purposes and have instructional relevance. And so the adoption of the AQuest and specifically the assessment tenet caused us to support, it encouraged us support. We were already doing some support for balanced assessment, I would argue, but it encouraged us to go further in that way. So kind of getting to the statewide assessment context, kind of talk about a little bit about who's here and who can help you with things. So this is a link. I'm not going to click on it now because I'm going to go to it later. It is the contact page for statewide assessment. It has all of our names, our numbers, and our email addresses, including the vendors as well and what customer services they have. So that's one place you can get it. But I'm going to talk about who else is available and the types of questions that you should direct to each of us, okay? So for myself and Dr. Clark, policy level questions, you could talk to it. Both of us have been DACs in districts before. And if you want to talk, we're not going to tell you what to do, but we'll talk through things with you and offer you our 2 cents worth if you have questions about those things. Accessibility questions can be directed to us. And then if you have any questions about security breaches, which I know nobody probably wants to really talk about, but if you have those questions, they can be directed to me. Two other people in our office there. Maggie Sis is an assessment program coordinator. Maggie takes care of all data things. Data. If you have a data question, I would direct them there first because most likely she's going to get them anyway. She takes care of the data corrections and making sure everything is as clean as possible. She goes through a lot of work and contacts districts often to try to make sure your data is correct. So if you have questions about data, she's the one to go to. Iris Owens, like I said, Iris is actually a ACT employee, but you wouldn't know it because she does such a great job being a team member for all of us. But she is our go-to person for ACT. If you have ACT questions, ordering, getting access to something, whatever the case may be, Iris, I would actually call Iris before I call ACT customer service. If Iris can't answer the question and she has to send you to ACT customer service, she will, but that's only a last resort. Otherwise, she tries to get you the information whenever she can. Iris will also be able to answer ACT online prep or AOP questions. And she'll be able to answer pre-ACT questions. So if you're in either one of those categories in your school is using those, she would be able to answer those questions and should be, I would say, probably your first contact as far as that goes. So Rhonda True. Rhonda is our skills grant coordinator. She's going to be on later and to tell you more about the skills grant. Like I said, skills is a science enhanced assessment grant we have from the federal government. So we've been working on science assessment in particular, but there's also some assessment literacy modules that are available through that, and some resources about creating classroom assessments for science, which with the new three-dimensional standards can be very helpful. So she'll talk about those resources later on. So if you have any questions about that, you can direct those to Rhonda. Rhonda is also filling in as their interim NAEP coordinator, so the National Assessment for Educational Progress, and she'll give information later on today about that. I'll kind of preview this and maybe I'll be careful not to bury the lead here, and I'll just get it out there. This is a light NAEP year, and light means that we don't have any districts that are required to give NAEP this year, which is kind of a good thing for many of our districts. But in the future, you may be required to give NAEP. And so we want to give you a broad overview of that and let you know who you can ask questions to if you have them. Allie Martinez Wilkinson is a new individual in the statewide assessment office. Allie actually is an NWA employee, but is housed here at the Department of Education. Allie is a professional development lead. And so she's going to be working with certified facilitators. We'll talk about those certified facilitators later. She'll be dealing with professional learning as it relates to assessment specifically. And she'll be able to answer general NWA questions. So if you have questions about how to get into CAP, the Comprehensive Assessment Platform, which we'll talk about later, she would be a good person for you to ask questions to. Last two, well, that's actually not the last two people I want to talk about. So Tyrena Webster and Stacy Weber are administrative assistants in the statewide assessment office. If you call our general number, you're going to get either Tyrena or Stacy. They will be able to send you to whoever you need to. So if you don't know who to talk to, you can call one of them and they'll send you hopefully to the right place. If you have specific questions, if you have teachers that have gotten contracts to write items for us or those types of things, Tyrena would be the primary person. You can also ask her questions about the website or timeline. If you have things that you're looking for and you can't find, most likely she'll be able to help you. And Stacy takes care of our events and logistics. She also can answer a lot of those website and timeline questions as well. But if they don't know the answer, they're going to send you to somebody else that can. So they're our first point of contact and do a lot of great work. Our office wouldn't run nearly as efficiently without those two. Also, this is so vendor customer service. If you have questions about technology or how to use a system, oftentimes your best resource is going to be the vendor themselves. We don't, we get some good information about the technology, but if it's a technology question, most likely the vendor is going to be the one you want to call. And I will show you those vendor contacts again later in the presentation. They're all on our assessment contact page, and we'll make sure you have those. But if you're specifically how to use a system or that technology, the vendor is probably the best person, the best entity to call in that case. Want to highlight Sharon Heater here. Sharon is our special education liaison to the assessment department. Sharon helps us with all things related to special education and assessment. Her information is there. She can answer accessibility for students with IEPs, both general and alternate, and she has lots of information about inscat alternate. So she works with us all the way through the year. Especially with the alternate, but with the general as well. So she's a good resource too. If you have accessibility questions, she would be a good person to call and to get information from. If you have questions, you can direct those her way as well. And then Allison Olson is the new Title III director, and she's the ELPA 21 coordinator. Allison's information is there. She can answer accessibility questions for EL students for NSCAS general and alternate, and all ELPA 21 questions should go to her because the assessment others in the assessment office don't have a lot of information about ELPA 21. So that would be a good resource for you. And the last specific person that I'll point to is Lane Carr. Lane is the Director of Accountability in AQuest. If you have accountability AQuest questions, he's going to be your go-to person for that and making sure he ensures that the accountability system is used. We basically hand our assessment data off to accountability and they use that information. So if you have questions specifically about the accountability system, I would direct those to Lane. He takes care of, oversees school and district classification, also information about the EBA or the evidence-based analysis tool could be directed to Lane as well. Here is our general information, our general inquiries. This is our general line. So if you don't know who to contact, right, you don't have this information or you have a question, you don't know who the best person to ask is, you can always call that general number there. You'll get Stacy or Tyrena, and they'll direct you to the person that can help you. And that email is our general email. And so if you have a question, once again, you don't know who to send it to, you can send it there and it'll get directed to one of us. This is the education or the assessment website. I'm going to actually wait until I go through all of my slides, and then I'm going to take you to the website and show you around a little bit. And show you some of the resources there. So, but I wanted you to have that in the PowerPoint so that you could get to it. So we'll do that at the end of my section. We'll go and take a look around the website because there's a lot of resources there. And I think that would be helpful to you as well. So, but we'll come back to that. Okay, communication. So, you are the only DAC for your district, so we only allow one DAC per district. That is purposeful. It allows us to manage it and to know who we should contact and doesn't add a bunch of confusion when it comes to who's responsible. But I would encourage you to work with your leadership team to determine how to communicate within the district. So once we send an email to you, you determine, each district determines how to share that information. In some cases, a DAC will immediately forward that to all their district leadership team. In some cases, they forward it to specific people that are in charge in each of their buildings. Sometimes they pick and choose the information with which to share to others, and they choose the timeline in which they do it. You really have the ability to determine that, but I guess I encourage people, having done this myself, I encourage people to talk with their leadership team and discuss what is the best way to do it. So for instance, if there is a ACT information, you might just send that to a single person at your ACT, at your high school building for ACT. It really depends on how you want to do that. So that's up to you. Just so you know, when others contact us, so if you have somebody else in your district that contacts us, we're going to answer their questions. We don't say, hey, are you the DAC? And you, because only the DACs get information. We're going to answer any question that comes our way. But oftentimes, if it's something that we think you need to know about, we'll let you know. So if we have an email that comes in from a teacher to us, we're going to answer that question. But we're also going to give you a heads up that we got that communication so that you know that that's going on. We think that's professional courtesy to you. But we also, the information from the department is not exclusively for DACs. It's for anybody that would like that information. And that includes parents, right? So if a parent calls us, we'll give them information. Most of the time, we're going to direct them back to a district and say, that's a district decision. You need to talk to the district, just like you would expect to happen in a hierarchy in a school. But we also don't lie to them, and we give them the information because we're obligated to do so. So we will tell them the truth, but also say when a decision is yours, and we won't undermine those decisions that you make either. So Indy emails. So we send out DAC emails pretty frequently, I would say, but we try to keep them to only when we need to. We try not to fill your inbox. Some days you'll think that that's not probably true because some days you'll get multiples of them. We try to mark them as DAC. We always call them DAC updates when they're from the department. In our opinion, those are important and you should read them all the way through. But that's probably what everybody thinks about every email they send you. So, but please pay attention to those. We mark them that way so that you can search for them and find them later. We also will mark them if there's ACT information. We also make sure that's in the subject line, so that you have that. If you want to pass that on to a specific ACT contact in your district, you can do that. Hopefully, fairly easy. Currently, we're doing biweekly NWA partner emails. NWA is a major partner in this work, not only for the summative assessment, but for some of the other supports. And so we do a biweekly information. Originally, last year, those had a lot of repetitive information in them. Usually there is some new information every time. I would encourage you to at least skim through that. There is a lot of repeat information in there because we're trying to get to everybody and make sure they have that information. But I would encourage you to skim through it and see if there's anything new, and just as a reminder for things that are happening. A lot of our work doesn't happen till second semester, but it would be probably a mistake not to pay attention to assessment during first semester, because there's a lot of information that we're helping you get ready for things that are going to happen second semester. So we're trying to prepare you and prepare things all over the district, all over the state, in order to get ready. So you're also going to get vendor emails. ACT sends vendor emails. NWA will occasionally send vendor emails. Occasionally DRC will send vendor emails. We have a resource on our website that hasn't been updated for the year. We're going to update that and then send it out to all DACs again. And that includes a list of who you should expect emails from. And what I would say is if they're on that list, you should probably pay attention to it when it comes through. And so I can show you where that list is currently, but like I said, it hasn't been updated for this year. We'll update that and get it out to everybody again. We'll send it to everybody in a DAC email and let you know when that's been updated. Okay, so now we're going to talk about summative testing. We're going to talk about a lot of different pieces, but we're going to talk about inscat summative. So inscat summative is really divided into three pieces. The inscat general summative, the vendor for that is NWEA. inscat alternate the vendor for that is DRC, or Data Recognition Corporation. And inscat ACT is obviously provided by ACT. Tested grades for inscat general and alternate, we have ELA is 3 through 8 and once in high school. Mathematics is 3 through 8 and once in high school. And science is 5, 8 in high school. Obviously, for the majority of our students, high school test is ACT, except for alternate students. So a student could take the alternate assessment if they qualify in high school. The other thing that I'll say is you notice that I'm saying high school. It doesn't say 11th grade on there. It's really, really important that you know this, is that we test third-year cohort students. So once a student enters the 9th grade, they are assigned to a cohort. No matter where they are in their schooling, they test in the 3rd year they've been in high school. And so we actually don't test juniors. Most of those students that we test are juniors, but we actually test 3rd-year cohort students. So if a student is behind in credits and is a sophomore, but it's their 3rd year in high school, they're expected to test. If a student has progressed at an advanced pace and they're a senior, but it's their 3rd year in high school, they test. You should not test any students that are not in their 3rd year cohort. So if a student is only in their 2nd year, but they're classified as a junior by credits, they don't take the test. They have to wait another year before they get to take the test. So you should make sure you test all of your 3rd year cohort students, and that is the list that we're going to give you. If you don't test your 3rd year cohort students, they get 0 scores. If you test students that are not 3rd year cohort, say a 2nd year cohort, we're going to throw those results out. Okay. And we also have to pay for that test. So I'd appreciate it if you wouldn't test kids that are not in the 3rd year cohort. I can't stress that enough. We've tried to change our language to make sure that every time we talk about it, we say 3rd year cohort or 11th grade 3rd year cohort. And to hit that over and over again, please make sure you know that. You'll be able to look in the advisor system to see what what cohort your students are in. So if there's any questions about that, it's best that you do those before testing, not after testing. Getting that changed at the end of the year is really difficult. Getting it changed now is relatively simple in comparison. Maybe not simple, but relatively a lot easier than afterwards. A couple of years ago, we moved to the inscat system, or the Nebraska Student Centered Assessment System. Really, we were trying to create supports for that balanced assessment system, like I mentioned earlier. So we have the summative inscat. We also, which I talked about those 3 parts here just a second ago, and we'll go into more detail about those. We also have the interim map growth assessment. Interim map growth is available to all 3 through 8 students in the state of Nebraska at no charge to the district. The state picks up that cost, and you can do that as many times a year as you want to, up to 4 times. You can do it fall, winter, spring, and technically you can do it in summer if you wanted to, if you were going to try to measure what's going on in a summer school program or something that might be applicable. But that interim assessment is optional for districts to use. What I'll tell you is that 244 districts used that product last year, and there's 244 districts in the state of Nebraska currently. So all districts used it at some level, but there's varying. So it's varied. Some districts only test specific classes, some test all of those grades, and some will test up to 3 times a year. Some will only test once or twice a year. That's your decision. There's really good reasons to do some of those things. If you're testing at the beginning of the year or the end of the year, you'd be able to look at growth within the school year and those types of things. And many of our districts are using map growth information to fuel the school improvement process. And so it's if you're looking at making a change to that, you might want to look and see how that would impact your school improvement process. If you have questions about those, please direct those to, we would be glad to have a discussion with you about your testing if you have that, but that is an optional piece for districts right now. We also offer TestWiz, which is a formative classroom tool. We've already taken information about who's going to use that this year. I will mention that we're looking at if that's the best support to offer for formative and classroom use. So we may be making a change in the future about using TestWiz. But basically it is a online tool that has 2 assessment item banks, and your teachers would be able to create, or your district would be able to create assessments to be able to use throughout the year at the classroom or and for formative uses, because you can turn around those results really quickly and use them for to inform instruction. The last piece we'll talk about is professional learning. So the state, along with NWA, has a program called Certified Facilitators. There's currently 72 of them in the state, and they offer they are trained to offer different modules that could be used for professional learning in your district. And so we'll come back and talk about that a little bit more in detail. So first, inscat general summative, right? So our vendor partner, again, like I said, is NWA. Test management and results are available through the comprehensive assessment platform. One of the disadvantages of having 3 vendors currently is that you have lots of different platforms or systems that you have to access. And so we're going to go over each one of those systems today to give you a broad overview. And that way, when we're using acronyms, you'll know what we're talking about, hopefully. So the comprehensive assessment platform is called CAP for short. It is a password protected user rights system. So you should have district administration rights, but you would control who else has rights to that system in your district. So if you wanted all the principals to have access to the school information, you could have that happen. If you wanted to give others rights to the district level, you could give them to that. So in some of our small districts, all the administrators might have district level access, but you and your leadership team should determine what access and who should have access to those. It is the same platform as map growth, right? So map growth and inscat general are the same platform in CAP. NDE will provide NWA with rosters in January. So we'll pull all the information. It goes from your student information system, your SIS system, to advisor, and then we will pull that information and send it to NWA, and we'll keep that up to date. We will send that information based on grade levels. So for grades 3 through 8, any student in grade 3 through 8 would get sent to inscat general as long as they don't have an alternate assessment flag. Okay, an alternate assessment flag is done through your special education system, information system. And so if a student doesn't have an alternate assessment flag and they're in grades 3 through 8, we would automatically upload those students to the general system for inscat general. Also, I'll mention FTE, so full-time equivalency. Any public school student that is enrolled in a public school 51% time or more we are expecting to test. So if you have a homeschool student that comes in for band or PE, for instance, but they're not there for 51% of the time, they would not test, and they're not able to test, actually. They should not test. But if they were there for over 51% of the day, 51% or more of the day, they would test. Likewise, if you're providing special education services to a student that is going to a private parochial school, most likely if you're just providing special education services, they don't hit that 51% threshold, so they would not test. So that is the determining factor. One of the common errors we see in student information systems and your data systems is that FTE. If you serve students from a parochial school or homeschool, you might double check that information in your student information system to make sure it is correct, and that it's not full-time. So a lot of times those students get put in as full-time students when they're not. If they're at full-time, they're going to get pulled over, and then we'll have to go through cleanup processes to try to make sure that they're not. One important note is that sometimes some of those students want to test, even though they're less than 51% of time, because their parents want that, especially with the ACT, that happens more often than it does with the other tests, but they're not allowed to test. So that law only puts forth that we test public school students, and there's only funding to test public school students that are 51% or more. Okay. So continuing with the general information, students' access to testing is through a lockdown browser. It also allows access to map growth, right? So that the same software system that we use for map growth is used for inscat general, which is nice. You install it or distribute it to each device. And there's a website that has additional information about the general summative. We'll actually take a look at that later on. But that website has a lot of information specifically from NWA about inscat summative, also has information about map growth. So 2020 dates for the testing window for inscat general and alternate. The general and alternate windows are exactly the same. So for grades 3 through 8 and high school alternate, March 16th through April 24th. In 2020, yes, we're talking about 2020. I know it seems kind of surreal a little bit, but we're almost there. And then that last week, April 27th through May 1st is a makeup week. You should schedule all of your testing from March 16th through April 24th. And then if you have to finish any makeups, you would do that. You can do makeups before that, right? So that you don't have to wait to do makeups, but that week should not be the initial schedule. That's there for you just in case, right? So if you have it scheduled earlier and there's a blizzard, which is always possible, or if there's flooding, which seems to be a real possibility these days in Nebraska, that week is meant to be a makeup week, and you should not schedule any of your tests during that time. And what I would say is the earlier you schedule the test, the safer you are. If you schedule them on April 24th and something happens and you don't get them done, there's nothing that we can do for you. You're going to get 0 scores for any student that does not finish the test. And so the earlier you schedule them, the better off you are. Obviously, if you have a smaller district and not as many students to test, you could schedule it a little bit later. But the window is as big as it is to try to make sure that you're able to get it done. And our largest districts are able to get the testing done within the time. There's usually not a problem with that. But occasionally we do run into people that are struggling because they schedule too late in the window. So please don't do that. It's a difficult situation when that happens and then something out of your control happens. We've had loss of power, we've had blizzards, we've had just about everything. So schedule it early and get it done if at all possible. So just a couple of timeline pieces. What I'll say is these are not all of the information that you'll need, but we'll send out information regularly to you. If there's a deadline, we'll remind you of it. We don't, just tell you one time. We'll tell you multiple times. If you miss the deadline, oftentimes we'll follow up with you after that as well, because we need you to do things at a particular cadence so that the whole system works well. So know that in early January, we're going to provide NWA with rosters. That means that you want to have your student information system up and running and updated as soon as by then. You have to have that done anyway, and it's a lot easier now that we have the advisor system because those systems are talking automatically to one another. So as long as you keep your student information system up to date, then we're up to date because that should be talking directly with advisor anyway. So that's a lot easier than it used to be. We used to have to do manual uploads and all kinds of stuff. And so that's a lot easier now. So, but know that we're going to do that in early January. We're going to pull that information, and actually we're going to pull it multiple times so you don't have to worry about it quite so much, but we'll give you a schedule of when we're going to do that. Mid-January, you're going to get inscat manuals, guides, and item samplers. One thing that I'll mention is we don't call them practice test anymore. We call them item type samplers. Just a second, that didn't pop up. Getting a little bit of lag, just a second. Sorry, bear with me just a second. Something is going on. I'll be right back with you. Something happened with our technology. We're trying to fix it. All righty, we're back. I'm sorry about that. Thank you, Drew. So like I was saying, in mid-January, you'll get access to inscat manuals, guides, and item samplers. Item type samplers are really practice tests. What they're meant to do, but we stopped using practice test. That's where I was, because practice test indicated to a lot of people they should get some sort of results, and that's not the intention. The intention is to expose students to the different item types. So we encourage that all students use the item type samplers before they take the inscat summative tests. In late January, you're going to order, districts are going to order paper pencil materials. Know that this is a less of an issue than it has been in the past. This last year, less than 200 students statewide in grades 3 through 8 used paper pencil tests. And there are only a limited number of reasons that are allowable for paper pencil. So in general, most of our districts shouldn't be using paper pencil, or would only have 1 or 2 students maybe using paper pencil. In general, it's better if students are not using the paper pencil, because they don't get the adaptive nature of the test if they're using paper pencil. So only students with specific accommodation needs should be using that, or certain medical needs. That's all outlined in the accommodations manual. If you have questions about that, please let us know. In February, on the 18th, 19th, and 20th, there'll be 3 different trainings. It's the same training 3 different times. It's test admin training. And so you'll get information specifically about administering the inscat summative test. We'll publish the times and on each of those dates later on as we get closer. On February 24th, you'll get access to manage activities. You can start setting up your test sessions and managing everything to do with the test. That's almost a month ahead of time, because you'll have the window doesn't open until March 16th. Then on May 5th, which is after the test, that is the deadline to return any paper pencil materials. What I'd say is, as soon as you're done with paper materials for your district, you should send those in right away. But this is the deadline, the ultimate deadline to get those in. One of the things that we're always trying, and we're cognizant of how long it takes to get results back. One of the things that delays that oftentimes is paper pencil. So as soon as you can get those turned in, but you'll send them all back in at the same time. You shouldn't send them in one at a time or anything like that. These have been out here for a little while now. These are our new levels for our achievement levels for both general and alternate. A couple of pieces about this: developing on track and college and career ready benchmark. One of the things that I think is important about this is that nobody thinks that we're saying a student in 3rd grade is college and career ready. No student in 3rd grade. Maybe Doogie Howser. Of course, that probably dates me a little bit. No students are probably college and career ready at the 3rd grade. If you look at the definition of that, and benchmark's an important part of that. Learners who meet college and career ready benchmark demonstrate advanced proficiency in knowledge and skills. They're likely to be ready for academic success. Likely to be ready for academic success at the next grade level. On track, and what that means. There's very similar, right? But they demonstrate proficiency, not advanced proficiency. So the college and career ready benchmark is really advanced. On track doesn't mean that students aren't doing well. They're doing just fine. They're on track to being successful. And so both of those categories are proficient. And developing learners are not yet demonstrating proficiency, and they may need additional support. Of course, you have other measures, but this is what how we've defined the achievement levels for the NSCAS General and Alternate. As you get results, one thing to note is the science test. Last year's science test was still below meets and exceeds. Because it was based on the legacy standards and not the college and career ready standards. I'll talk a little bit more about science here soon. I had a question about a third-year cohort student. So if you missed a third-year cohort student last year, do we test him this year, or do we just move on? You're just going to move on. That student has missed that test in that window. It will be scored, the student gets a 0 score for that, and we've gone forward. And so that's yeah, we'll just move on at that point in time. So I'm going to come back to that, Kim, I'm going to come back to that accommodations questions here in a little bit, okay? So NSCAS General and ELA Math, just a little bit of more information about this. So these tests are aligned to the Nebraska College and Career Ready standards. They include multiple choice and technology enhanced items, what we call TE items. Those might be drag and drops, that might be multiple select. Those item type samplers we talked about earlier have all of those examples in them if you want to check those out. And those item type samplers can be for teachers and DACs can use them if they want to look at the items that we're currently using on those tests. It is adaptive, a computer adaptive test for both math and ELA. That really means that as a student gets questions right, the test gets harder. As they get them wrong, the test gets easier. But right now, that those are still on grade level tests, all right? So if you have a 4th grader and they keep getting questions right, they'll never get to 5th grade standard questions. They'll just be more difficult 4th grade items. And likewise, if they're getting them wrong, they won't go down to 3rd grade. Map growth, right? So the interim map growth goes outside of grade level, but NSCAS summative does not. It is an untimed single session, but we encourage, and it can be divided into multiple sessions, right? So it's scheduled or it's in the system as a single session. We have guidance about scheduling. Most of the time you want to schedule at least 2 sessions, no more than 3. We have a lot of data on that, and really 2 or 3 sessions is the best, but we'll show you where there's more information about scheduling. So NSCAS General and Alternate Science this year. So General and Alternate Science is a field testing year. When we say field testing, we're really testing items, not students, right? So what we're doing is we're testing all the items on the test to make sure that we can run an operational test in 2021. It is census field testing, and census means all, right? We're going to test all students in grades 5 and 8. It's required. It's not an optional test. So all students in grades 5 and 8 need to take this test, but districts will not receive results, and science will not be used for accountability in 2020. So we're really just testing the items, trying to make a test, an operational test for the future. And those nothing goes into the accountability scores. It's a good opportunity for students to be exposed to that, and for us to move to the Nebraska College and Career Ready Science standards. In 2021, we will use that will be an operational test, and those results will be published and likely to be used in accountability. For science, I'm not going to go into details of this, but you can see that last spring we did a pilot getting ready for this this change in the test. We've sent out a lot of information about the results from that here recently. We're doing a field test this spring and then assessing operational testing in 2021. A lot of work was done on the way to this. I cover that extensively in a presentation I did for Administrator Days. That's still available on the website if you want to look back at that. If you have trouble finding it, let us know and we'll show you where that is. Okay, so all results from the general summative test are reported publicly at the school and district level. Those go on the NEP or the Nebraska Educational Profile. Results feed into the AQuest accountability system. There are rules for that. So for instance, a student needs to be enrolled in a full academic year for their results to be used in accountability or for most accountability measures. And so every student that's tested gets reported. Some of them make it go into the accountability system. Some of them don't, based on the business rules that we have developed for that. So now we're going to talk about NSCAS interim. So once again, this is map growth for 3 through 8. Like I said, it's optional for districts. You can utilize that up to 4 times a year: fall, winter, spring, and summer if you want to. It is also a computer adaptive test, but it goes above and below grade level, sometimes way above grade level. Students can technically get high school questions, but you do get immediate results for this. So this is a better tool if you want to inform instruction than the summative test. It's designed to do that. There's lots of resources available and information for districts, schools, and teachers. Rostering is the district's responsibility, so we don't. NDE does not get involved in rostering for map growth. If you have questions about map growth, about using map growth, the certified facilitators that I'm going to talk about, every ESU in the state has a certified facilitator and have been trained on how to use map growth results. So if you're looking for help there about using professional development, about how to use those results, I encourage you to contact your certified facilitators. If you have questions about who those are, we can let you know. There's also a list online of who the certified facilitators are. Talk briefly about the formative classroom test whiz. Like I said, it is an optional assessment tool. It's online delivery. There's 2 item banks. Items are automatically scored, and then reports are made available to whoever used the system. But the system the user has to create the tests, assign the test, administer the test. There's all kinds of videos online with this system to use this system. Like I said, we're examining whether we want to continue use of this formative assessment support in the future. We're going to be doing that during this year. So if you're not using it, don't worry about it. If you are, that's great. Continue to do so. Once again, rostering is a district responsibility. So getting students in the system, although Certica, the people that created TestWiz, the company that runs TestWiz, will help you auto roster if you're interested in that. So a little bit more from our NSCAS professional learning, about NSCAS professional learning. So before NWA had a contract with Nebraska, we had certified facilitators across the state. There was about 50 or so. We now have 72 certified facilitators, and it's a trainer model. They have different modules that they're trained in, and then are able to provide information to districts and their teachers. Those certified facilitators are, like I said, in every one of our ESUs, and then also in our larger districts we have certified facilitators, since they oftentimes provide their own professional learning training in those larger districts. But there's a lot of quality training that goes on that these certified facilitators have access to. And so if you're looking for professional learning opportunities on a professional learning day, you might reach out and contact them and see how they can help. They're trained in, these are just some of the things that they're trained in: assessment literacy, using map growth and inscat results, and creating quality goals for map growth. And so those are just some of the things that they could help with. So now we're going to talk about inscat alternate. The partner is DRC, Data Recognition Corporation. The test management and results are available through Insight. There's a login there, or a place where you can log in there. Hopefully you have access to that already. If you don't, let us know. We'll help with that. Once again, it's a password protected user rights system. You have district level rights. You can give others rights in that system, but you control that. The district controls that. We don't really get involved except to help you with that. But you can control who has access to that system. Sometimes with this system, we see more teachers having access to this system, since it's for alternate students. And usually there's only a few of those in a district, so they might let a special education teacher, a special education director have access to this system, and that is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but you will determine who has access and what level of access they're going to have. Once again, NDE provides DRC with rosters in January. The first thing we look at is the alternate assessment flag. So we provide everybody that has the alternate assessment flag an advisor to DRC based on grade levels 3 through 8, and high school, the third year cohort students, and based on FTE, like we mentioned before, 51% of the time. So if they meet all of those criteria, they get sent to DRC, and we would expect them to have an alternate test event, or tests, multiple tests for each of those students. So students and proctors access to testing. So we moved to an online test, but there is still a paper option. So if you want students and proctors to access testing, they need DRC's Insight lockdown browser. You install that and distribute it to devices. Remember that only about 1% of students are going to be taking this test. So you might only have, if you're a small district, you might only have one or no students taking this test, which is perfectly fine. And so you might not need this on any devices or a limited number of devices. So as far as your tech people go, they don't need to put this on every machine in your district, because you won't need it. Technology information is available about Insight. And if your tech people need that, if they're new or haven't used that before. It's really important to note that the inscat summative is intended for students with the most significant cognitive disabilities. It's typically about 1% or less of the population in the state. Federal guidelines only allow for 1% of students to take the assessment at the state level. And so we are actively working to try to get to that 1% threshold. We've been over just slightly the last couple of years. When we're over as a state, we have to apply for a waiver. Also, if a district is going to be over that 1%, they have to provide a justification letter to us. Those will get sent out here relatively soon. It's really important that your IEP teams are using the NDE guidelines for eligibility, and that they're following through with that. Not all students are eligible for that, and it's really important that you're using those guidelines for eligibility to determine if a student is eligible or not, and not just making a snap decision, because not all students qualify for that test. We are actively trying to reduce those numbers and make sure they're down. Last year, we looked at the student's primary disability. We found students with speech language disabilities. Typically, they would not qualify for the alternate test. If they just have a speech language disability, most likely their cognitive disability isn't really affected, and so they wouldn't qualify. And so examples like that, where we keep working with districts across the state to make sure that the correct students are taking this test. If you have questions about this at all, I would encourage your SPED teacher, SPED director, to contact Sharon Heater. We gave her information earlier on. You can also contact myself, and we can discuss those. The most important thing is that you're using those guidelines. A district can be over 1% because in some cases one student might put you over 1%. So there's not anything wrong with being over 1%. But you do have to tell us why. And one of the biggest reasons might be you're a small district. So don't think that you can't go over. But as a state, we need to be at that 1% or under. And so there's going to be many districts that have 0%. And you might be over this year, but not under next year. So if you have questions about this at all, please let us know. So ELA and math are aligned to the Nebraska College and Career Extended Standards. And so for students with the most significant cognitive disabilities, we have extended standards that kind of simplify, I shouldn't say simplify, they break down the regular standards to be the skills that students need to have before they get to the general standards is really what's going on. And so this test is based on those standards, those extended standards. The science test is once again going to be a field test this year and is aligned to the new College and Career Ready extended standards. And there's a question about how we calculate the 1%. The 1% is actually calculated based on students that take the test, right? So it's all the students in grades 3 through 8 and that third year cohort based on that 1%, not all the students in your student body. The inscat alternate is only multiple choice options and is only 3 answer options. Typically when we do multiple choice, it'd be 4 answer options, but we've simplified this for this population. So it's only 3 answer options. It's also a one-to-one administration. Every alternate student is only tested one at a time. It's read aloud by a proctor, the entire test is. It's computer or paper pencil based on the student's needs. And so that's an individual decision based on the student and their ability to interact or the proctor's ability to enter those that information. Proctors enter or records responses. So in all cases, in most cases, the proctor is able to and should enter the responses. NDE provides a recorded training for proctors for this test. You will receive no materials for this test. So you're not going to get an order delivered to your district. You're either going to print it out or just use the materials from the website. So don't be waiting for us to send you something. You're going to have to get on there and print it, okay? Or get the online system up and running. Regardless of how a student takes the test, whether it's online or paper pencil, all responses must be entered into the computer system. You may have a non-responsive student, so a student that is nonverbal or cannot communicate. If they should be given at least 1 item for each test. And if there's reason to think they will continue to be non-responsive, then there's a place to mark that in the test. You don't have to make a student that is non-responsive go through the entire test if they're non-responsive. and you have reason to believe they won't be non-responsive. Typically, you will see non-responsive students the same for all tests that they have to take. Typically, a student wouldn't be responsive for one test and non-responsive for another test. So that should typically be the same for all of those. Once again, the inscat alternate, and this should say alternate as well, the alternate and general dates are the same, right? So it's the same window, same makeup window as well. Key dates for alternate. On October 28th, we're planning on posting new online tools training materials for science. That is basically the practice opportunity for students. The other online practice training is already available for ELA and math and Insight. You can give those anytime. Students can be exposed to those multiple times if you want to practice with the students so that they're familiar with how the test will work and how the testing system is made up. On the 15th of January, we're going to provide DRC with rosters so that we'll pull that information from advisor on that day. Anything that's correct on that day will be good. If you can have it be correct, if your alternate assessment flags could be correct by then, that would be great because it'll reduce errors and headaches later on for all of us. On February 17th, districts will have access to the management activities. You'll be able to get in there, be able to see the students that we've placed in the system and who we expect to test. You'll be able to make sure people have access. And then on March 2nd, the administration manuals will be available. So we don't post those till a little bit later, till closer to the assessment window, because they are secure materials. It is really important that anything that you print is destroyed in your district. It is secure and should be destroyed after testing. It's also your responsibility to make sure that nobody has access to that shouldn't have it. It's really important to note that as secure material, and you have a high level of responsibility for keeping it secure. And then May 1st is the deadline to enter student responses and accommodation. You won't send those in to us, right? You enter those into the computer system. Any responses and accommodations in the system, and May 1st is the deadline, which is the last day of the assessment window. So make sure those are done by then. Again, we use the same descriptions for the achievement levels. That was done purposefully. Really what we're talking about for these students is those extended indicators and not the general indicators though, and the skills that are associated with that. Once again, students that are taking the alternate assessment are probably not college and career ready, but they may be hitting the college and career ready benchmark for our college and career ready standards, which is why we use college and career ready, because they're college and career ready standards. For these alternate students, they should be learning the college and career ready extended standards though. Once again, results are publicly reported. In most cases, alternate and general results are combined. In grades 3 through 8, they're combined when we talk about proficiency. At the high school level, that is different. We do not mix ACT and alternate scores together, but we do on the general and the alternate. Alternate functions kind of like a subgroup, so you're able to pull those apart and see what your proficiency level is on those individuals, for those individuals and for those groups. But a lot of times that information is masked on the public side because only a few students would be taking the test. But on the secure side, you'd be able to look at that information. The results, again, feed into the AQuest accountability system. So some general notes about inscat accessibility. We have a summative and alternate accessibility manual. It's going to be updated very soon. I think it's all but ready to be put out there. It includes tools and tools 1 through 3 in a short form. In general, your special education teachers should be reading the entire manual. If you have a new special education teacher, I'd encourage them to do that. All of the information in that is pertinent as they're making their IEPs, as they're updating their IEPs. The tools 1 through 3 is really for a reference for IEP meetings. It's really not intended to be used in isolation of the entire manual because the manual gives additional good information. If you have questions about those accessibilities and the accommodations that are available to students, please let us know. Kim, I will come back to that accessibility question. I haven't had a chance to read it all yet. I'll come back to that after the break, okay? Things to know about our accessibility manual. Writing rules for all students is impossible. It's impossible to write a manual that covers every student and every situation. If you feel that a student is not accounted for in those accommodations, please let us know and have a conversation about it. We are able to allow for other accommodations on an individual basis. And so if there is a situation that requires that, please let us know. You can contact Sharon Heater, myself, or Trudy Clark to have those discussions. Oftentimes, we may not give you an answer right away. We might take it back and have a discussion with our group that makes those decisions. But there are things that are not covered in this because we can't cover every single situation. So if you ever have questions and you think that a student isn't getting what they need, it's better to ask a question than just assume that they can't have it. There's not a lot of these every year. There's only a handful every year that probably fall into this category. But it's better to ask than not, and we never mind that you ask that because advocating for children is your responsibility. So. Accommodations for students with IEPs must be recorded in their IEPs and used in daily instruction. So you should not be doing something on the inscat tests that you're not doing daily in instruction. So that should be as consistent as possible, and it needs to be in their IEPs. One thing that I would say is do not assume that more is better. Sometimes accommodations get in students' ways as opposed to help them. If you overwhelm them with accommodations, sometimes they don't know what to do. And so it's important that they have access to what they need, but not more than they need. And like I said, it should go back to that, what is happening in daily instruction. And so if they're not using something daily, then they probably shouldn't be given that on the test because that's going to maybe confuse them or make them do worse than they would normally. The manual does not change once we put it out there for the year. Districts are always able to submit suggestions for the future. It hasn't changed very much and recently. At the beginning of the program, it changed more. And we added additional things. There hasn't been a whole lot out there, but I would say we're always open to suggestions and looking at what we can put in there. We also have to think about making sure we adhere to the test and not allow things that break the validity and the reliability of the test, but also things, accommodations that will help level the playing field for students. So we're always keeping that in mind as we work forward, and we work with our special education counterparts and our EL counterparts to do that. You're going to record accessibility supports. So there's a subsection of accessibility supports in the manual that we ask you to record for us and to mark as when students are using. All of that will be involved in the training that will happen later on during the year. But it's important for us to be able to monitor those. If we want to do research, if we want to follow this and see which accommodations, accessibility supports are being used and not, that's important information for us. And I should have changed that. inscat general, we record those in CAP by May 7th. And I should change that. That should say inscat alternate in Insight. They changed the name of that. It used to be eDirect. It's now called Insight. And that should be by May 1st. So I apologize for that. We'll change it before we put it up on the website. Questions directed to NDE, both myself and, like I said, Sharon Heater. Also, Trudy Clark could answer most of those questions as well. We will do a accessibility Q&A session. We're planning on doing that this year in January or February. We'll let you know when that happens. We're getting here close to the end of my section, but we're going to look at the website too before we're done and take a break. I know we've been going at this for a while now. And the other important dates that I want you to pay attention to, in October, we're going to go on a road show. I don't know why we call it the road show. I kind of hate that title, but that's what we've been calling it since before I was here. So we'll probably keep calling it that. So we're going 5 different places across the state. Those are repeat sessions, right? So you don't have to come to more than one of them. But we strongly encourage DACs, all DACs, to come to one of these sessions. There'll be good information for the year. And I will highlight that we are going to talk, one of the big parts of these sessions, we'll talk about the future of the NSCAS program as well and where we're headed. And so there's going to be really good information about that as well. Once again, this session will be recorded. If you can't make it to one of those, we'll record that information for you and put it out there. But it will be better in person. Definitely. And so if you can make it to one of those sessions, we strongly encourage you to do so. The registration link is there. We also sent that out. You're also able to bring others with you. If there's somebody else in your district that you want to bring for additional support for yourself, have them register and sign up as well. We're only registering it not to keep track of you, but to make sure that we're not running out of rooms in our venues. So that's why we're asking you to register. But in general, I strongly encourage you to come. And if we haven't met you before, we'd like to meet you in person. That would be good as well, since we missed that opportunity at Administrator Days this year. A couple other pieces that I'll talk about. One, we never mind feedback. If you have feedback for us about how something's running, about how we can make things better, we're always open to that. Send it in. We'll talk to our vendors. We'll talk to us about how to do it. Some things we'll be able to do, some things we won't, and there's a reason why we can't. But we're always open to that feedback because we're trying to always make things better. So please don't ever hesitate. I wanted you to know that we have other ways that we get feedback from districts, and we do that on a regular basis. We have an Assessment and Accountability Advisory Committee, AAA. Yes, it sounds kind of funny to say AAA. A lot of people have started adding the C on the end of it because they think that's better for some reason. But that is a group of district stakeholders. There's about 50 people in that group, actually, from all over the state. There's superintendents, there's DACs, there's special education directors, there's a couple of teachers, there's people from our NSEA, all kinds of different people that are there advising us. And so we bring to them specific questions as we're looking forward to the future, and they give us good feedback, and we listen to that very attentively. If they're telling us to do something, oftentimes we try to do that if at all possible. Unfortunately, not everything they ask us to do is possible or affordable or those types of things. And so there are limitations of resources, either time, money, or people power. But we always try to improve things. Also, we have a Technical Advisory Committee, or TAC, that is made up of 3 national measurement experts, psychometricians. And so we take technical issues to them. Also, there is a superintendent level position and a teacher level position on that TAC from the state of Nebraska. So there's 3 national experts plus 2 educators from the state of Nebraska that help advise us that way. We do occasionally send out surveys. Our vendors sometimes do that as well to try to get feedback on how they can do things better, which we always appreciate. And always, like I said, you can email or call anytime and have a conversation with us or make a suggestion. We don't mind that at all. I am going to click over now to I got about 10 minutes left, I think, if I remember my timeline correctly. I'm going to stop sharing, and hopefully it'll click over to this now. Yay. There we go. Okay. So, Noel, we'll send that to you. Absolutely. We'll send you the registration link again. Okay, so this is the Nebraska Department of Education website. I don't know if we're special or we're just popular, but over here on the right-hand side, there's a statewide assessment link that you can get to. And by popular, I mean people going there, not necessarily that people like us. So if you scroll down on the right-hand side, statewide assessment is there. I would encourage anybody that's a DAC to bookmark this page in their web browser, whatever web browser you use, because you should probably come here pretty often, and you probably want to know where it is and get to it easy. So right away, we're always going to put the newest information at the top. There's information on the test dates here. New information, so the administrator days information is there, those 2 sessions we did for administrator days. And general information, new information we always put on the front page so you can find it easily. Also, I talked before about the contact us page. Yes, you get to see a picture of me. I have to talk to Drew about that one. But everybody's information from the office is listed here, from the statewide assessment office, and we gave you those other Sharon Heaters and Allison Olson's information in the PowerPoint. So here's information about NWA, general inquiries. Here's information about TestWiz and Certica. Here's information about ACT, customer service lines, DRC, and here is the help desk information for advisor at the, so if it's your student information system, you might want to call the advisor help desk, put a ticket in there because they can help you. So there's a lot of information right there for the contact page, but right at the top for general inquiries, if you don't know who to contact, you can just let us know right there and we'll get it sent to the right place. So we try to put important assessment dates in here. We're continually updating those as we go. Here's district assessment information. So key messages and those types of things down here in the accordion menus. There's information about who the other DACs in the state are, and this is a password protected page. We're going to be updating that and sending it out soon. Information about quick reference sheets is here. If you're not going to be the DAC anymore, please fill out a form, or have your superintendent fill out a form and let us know who the new DAC is going to be. It's really important that there's not a break in that. We continue to send things out over the summer. And so if you're leaving that position, make sure somebody else is in place there. The standards assessment and accountability update is going to be coming out sometime this fall. And that'll be out. That's a big one document with a lot of information in it. Statewide assessment overview. This is actually the presentation from last year. This information from last year, this is the same place we'll post it. So if you want to come back and look at this video, look at these slides, this is where you would come. And then there's also a link to who reports what. If you want to know the rules about how we decide who gets reported for each district and who gets ultimately put into accountability, who reports what will tell you what your responsibility is really for testing. And so that's a really important document. I obviously don't have time to go into all of these. As you can see, we have information about inscat, the summative. Each of the content pages has good information. So here's the achievement level descriptors for ELA. The same is available on math. Here's the table of specifications. This tells you what is on our tests and for each grade level. There's also some samples as well if you want to look at some of the reading passages and questions that we aren't using now, but you may have used in the past. Math has the same information on it. Science assessment transition will have all of the new science information. As we continue to put out information, we've updated this a lot here recently. So as we're moving to that operational test in the spring of 2021 and the field test this year, if you're looking for resources, there's a lot of information going to be on that page. Here's the information for alternate, includes the guidelines. ACT, there's information obviously about ACT and ELPA 21 there. One place that's really important, and I'm not going to go into all the rest of this, there's NAEP information and those types of things. Assessment vendor partners is really important. If you go there, you can go to NWA's page, DRC's eDirect, which we should change to Insight, and ACT's portal page. Iris will talk about ACT's portal page, but this is how you can get to it. ACT puts a lot of information themselves up as far as training, resources. Also NWA, and I'm going to go there, puts a lot of information up for the summative test for grades 3 through 8. At the top, you can see the item type samplers, what we used to call practice tests. You can get into CAP or the Comprehensive Assessment Platform, learn more about professional learning or TestWiz. This gets updated regularly. This is probably a page that I would have bookmarked as well if I was a DAC. So this is a place that you want to go to get things off, and the test manuals are going to be here. All the archive documents from last year are there, so if you want to look at old documents in preparation for this year, that's great. Just don't confuse things because we do update them. Make sure you're using current manuals and those types of things instead of anything old. But there's also some resources for parents, teachers, and technology coordinators on this page as well. Assessment coordinators is the default, which is you. And there's information up there now that may be useful to you. Let's see. Technical reports are there. If you need something to sleep to, that's a good thing to watch. Yeah. So I am going to, Kim sent a question that's rather lengthy. I'm going to actually look at that and respond to that when we come back for break. We're going to give you 10 minutes now, 10:40, so we're going to start back at 10:50. Iris is going to be here taking the lead, so you get to listen to somebody else besides myself. If you have additional questions, please put them into chat, and I will be here to do the question and answer at the end. Like I said, I'll come back and answer Kim's question right away, and then we'll get into ACT, okay? So a 10-minute break, stretch your legs, run to the restroom, whatever you need to do, and we'll see you back at 10:50. Thank you. All right, welcome back. We're going to get going again here. So I'm going to answer a couple of questions, and then I'm going to turn everything over to Iris to talk about ACT. So Kim had a question about students that are hard of hearing and may need multiple accommodations. What I'd say in general is we do for a couple of different reasons, try to make sure students are using the text-to-speech feature. I talked about that pretty extensively in the training that I did, or the presentation I did for administrator days. We're really looking for standardization to keep things fair, and it really keeps teachers out of trouble, because anytime a teacher is involved with a student's test, there's always the possibility that something goes wrong, and so it keeps students safe, or teachers safe as well. What I'd say in general is that oftentimes, though, especially when we're talking about multiple technologies, we can have difficulties. And so this is a time, and this is a really good example of a time that you might want to call us. And Kim, I'd encourage you to call us and have a conversation about this. For individual students, they may have certain exceptions of those accommodations on the accessibility manual, because of the combination of different technologies working together is not always as smooth as we'd like. And so sometimes we have to make exceptions to make sure a student has a good testing experience. And so I totally understand the situation that you're describing there. So it's probably best if we have that conversation individually. And then we also had a question about alternate assessment scale scores. And the question says, are scale scores as compared to alternate assessment, or do they compare to the general population, right? So a student that is on track for alternate is not on track for general. It would not say that at all. They are on track for alternate. The other student is on track for general. I definitely wouldn't say that that's where they are. They may be on track for the sets of standards that they're being exposed to, because they should be learning the extended standards. But those are two different sets of standards too. So they're not, I wouldn't make them comparable in any way whatsoever. Okay. And I think that's all the questions I've had. I wanted to make one other point too. And this is maybe one of the most difficult areas we talk about, is students that are in Rural 18s or contracted programs. So it's external programs to your district. Those students, if they would normally be a tested student, also have to be tested. And we're not going to get into the details of all the things that have to happen. We work with those programs very closely. But it is ultimately a district's responsibility to make sure one of their students in one of those programs gets tested. And so it's important that you know if you have a student in one of those programs, and are paying attention to that as we get closer to that time frame, because those are probably one of the most difficult situations to make sure all your students get tested. And so paying attention to that is important, and knowing about them ahead of time. So if you don't know if you have students in any programs like that, you might want to do some checking with your district. I know that I didn't, when I was at DAC, I had a student in an alternate program. Student was never in our building. And so I didn't know about the student until it was time for them to be in a testing year. And then I found out about that student at that time, because they were being served in a different way. And I had to take them tests to make sure that they tested the student. It was an alternate student. And so you want to make sure, if you have kids on your rolls that you've never seen, and they're in one of these programs, you want to be aware of them now, instead of waiting until very deep in that window, because it'll be a difficult thing to do. But we'll give you more information in the trainings and those pieces as we move forward, okay? So I'm going to turn it over to Iris now. Continue to, I'll let you know. Continue to email or put questions in the chat, and we'll try to keep attentive to those as we move forward. Thank you. Iris.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for this opportunity to share this information with you. We at the assessment team just really appreciate all the work that you have to do to specifically make the ACT happen. It just doesn't happen by a miracle. It's all your hard work. And we just really want to thank you for that. I wanted to go over a few things real quick before, just kind of overview things. So when we provide the ACT, which is a state and federal mandated test, we at the assessment team, or NDE, provides the roster to do the ACT. So that's not something that you need to provide. It is similar to the NWEA or the general assessment test, where you make sure your information is correct in Advisor, and that's where we get the information. We send that to ACT, and then that's how we load your students. So you are not responsible for that part. I just wanted to do that because I just think that's kind of an overwhelming thing sometimes, and new DACs are like, what do I have to do? So, like, we don't want you to worry about that. Another thing to, before we get started too much into the operations of the ACT is foreign exchange students come into your high schools, and a lot of schools don't know what to do with them. And normally the suggestion is to put them in not the third year cohort unless you really want them to test. So usually it'll be the second year cohort. They may be taking junior classes, which is totally fine, but we want you to make that decision on what cohort they should be in. If you don't want them to test, don't put them in the third year cohort, because if they're in that cohort, we're going to expect the test from them. So we're going to move on now to very exciting. It is the 2020 test window dates. So we have 3 test windows. There is not a specific makeup test window, so please keep that in mind when you're looking at these dates. The first test window, the paper and pencil, which is overwhelmingly what people use, is March 24th, 2020. And then there's online test dates that a lot of schools use. They'll do all their students, or they'll do their makeup students in those windows. These are these dates. They'll be on the website once we load the PowerPoint for you. We've been providing this information for a bit, but if you don't have that and you want it before this is loaded onto the website, please let me know and I'll just send it to you. The accommodation students, paper and pencil, have a 2-week window in all 3 of these windows, but and then accommodation online is the 6 days, just like the online dates are. Okay, here's test window 2, which is similar. It's April 7th is the paper and pencil test date. Sorry, that's a mouthful, always hard to say. And those are the other dates that you need to consider. So at NDE, we would like you to choose test window 1 or test window 2 so that you have opportunities to do the makeup tests. And then you have this third test window. Potentially, if you choose the first window, you would have test window 2 and test window 3 to do all your makeup tests. But if you chose test window 2, then you would still have test window 3 to do makeup tests. We want to make sure we have opportunities for all those students to test.
Iris, I'm going to jump in.
I knew he would.
Do not choose test window 3.
Not as your initial test
not as
date.
your initial test window.
Right.
Choose 1 or 2.
Right, because it might snow that day and then you're out of luck because there's nothing after that. Okay.
It might, everything.
Who knows? You might do something. So that's our strongly recommend that. Okay, here's a list of some emails you might be getting from ACT. You might be getting something from state testing that's directly about, it'll always be about state tests, not from ACT. So it won't be about the national test necessarily. There'll be emails from accommodations if you register your students for accommodations. And then from myself, it probably most likely comes from the ACT.org email address, but sometimes it comes from the Nebraska.gov. And those are also my contact. And then my phone number. There's also a customer support phone number, and this is for educators, the 800 number. And then it has extension 2800. That's the Nebraska state. And then accommodations has the extension of 1788. And there's the hours that they're available now. Okay. All right. We're going to move on to big stuff. This is ACT Nebraska webpage. This is the portal page that Jeremy talked about before. It has a sign in on the top right side. That is for ACT.org. So if you want to register your students, that's where you sign in. You don't have to sign in for the Nebraska page for the information that you want for the ACT. So if you can see on the left, there's the ACT Online Prep, and the pre-ACT. So up there in web page, it's a link to this page. You don't have to sign up for that. I saw that question. This is free and available to you because you're going to need this. This is one of those pages that I highly suggest you bookmark. So it says State of Nebraska, and then you'll scroll down. You can scroll down here. Let me show you what this is. This is a little video of how to use this website page. It is a great opening. If you've never looked at anything on this website, please review this video. It's worth it. It'll give you how to get to all the information you're going to need. Okay. This is where you would scroll down from that video and you would have a choice. You can go to the ACT resources. So that's going to be all the information about accommodations, when test manual booklets, how to do online testing, just a tremendous amount of information for you. And the same with the pre-ACT, if that's what your district's chosen, or the ACT online prep. This is what the ACT test page will look like if you hit that link. We're going to have a schedule of events coming in September, which is down on the lower right corner there. This is all last year's information. It hasn't been updated yet. Once that schedule of events is available, ACT will give you the updates on those test dates. And then it has quick links to Pearson Access Next, which is the system we use for managing our participation, how, your students and reports, a lot of things. The test accessibility and accommodation system, the TAA is located, link there, and general information questions. And then it even has the Department of Education information, that's great. So some really good information for you. And if you would scroll down from that screen, this is what you would get. So here's your orientation. What's going to be new with the state test this year? So none of this has been updated. So if you go to this page right now, it's going to be last year's information. But in September, we should see the updated information. And we will send you an email once that's updated, and we'll get that out to you, okay? All right. So we're going to move on to accommodations. We will have a question and answer seminar webinar in November. We don't have an exact date yet, but we want to provide you with some information. This just kind of is an overview of what is required for accommodations with the ACT, how to best utilize your information so that you get the accommodations your students needs. They're available for any student with an IEP, a 504 plan, or they receive EL supports in your school. They must go through the Tested and Accessibility and Accommodation System, the TAA. You should have someone assigned to that at your school who does that on a regular basis. Sometimes it's the counselor, sometimes the test coordinator. If you need information on that, please contact me. That's the last bullet point there, but it's important to know that you need to have that updated so you can get those in. Dates to apply are going to probably be early to mid-November, and then it'll close in February. Those dates haven't been told to me yet. But please consider doing that before the end of the first semester. So in case there's any questions, in case they need more information, they want some specifics on an accommodation or a 504 plan, or or the EL support that you're asking for, they don't have enough information, the analysts want more information. Or if they deny it because you're asking for too many accommodations, you can review that and re-request that. I think that's the word. You can submitted again once you have that information. Generally speaking, and I had the privilege of sitting by the analysts when I worked in accommodations and listened to them, and 9 times out of 10, they'll say to whoever's requesting the accommodation is they're looking for information on what happens in the classroom. So if it doesn't happen in the classroom, they're not very likely to give that to the student unless you have extenuating circumstances. So please consider that when you're requesting your accommodation. You'll need to provide the IEP or the 504 plan, and I highly recommend a teacher survey that ACT provides for EL students. It's the letter with the school's letterhead, and you type on that what supports they receive, and then you also need to provide their ELPA 21 scores helps. You can include other materials you believe give a great picture, the complete picture of what the student needs in the classroom, and then how that could be used in the ACT test. So, and again, changes, if you need help with that, let me know in the TAA system. Or if you have questions about accommodations, please don't hesitate to ask me. Pearson Access Next is a system that we use to load up the students who should be taking the test. It is the place where you'll receive your reports at the end of the year. It's the place where you will tell us whether you're going to do paper and pencil or online, what test window you're going to be using. That covers a lot of things. If you don't have access, let me know. A schedule of events is going to be provided to us in September. I'm going to show you a little bit, show you kind of what it looks like next, so that you have kind of a heads up of what to look for, and that'll come in an email to you and to the DACs and to the test coordinators. Managed participation is where you tell us whether you're doing paper, whether you're doing online, and when you're going to do it, and that will be in February. It's always in February. It's usually the second Friday in February. But since we don't have the schedule of events, I can't give you a specific date, but we'll have that soon. Reports are now available. Yes, we've had some hiccup with that, and we're going to get some of that information corrected and back to you as soon as possible. The profile reports where your students actually tested, that's already available, and you should be able to download those reports. The state accountability reports just went out. We're working on those to get those updated and corrected for you. And then you will also receive another report, the graduating class report, which is different than I know you get confused. It's okay. If you have questions about that, let me walk you through that. So that will come out in October as well. Please download these as soon as you can, specifically the profile report right now. So because they're going to go away in mid-October, and you're not going to have access to them. You can get access to them, but it's a little more difficult. So might as well load them up, download them. My goodness, sorry about that. Download them now while you can. And okay, I already answered that. Added that there. Okay, this is what the schedule of events looks like. This is last year's, but it'll give you the test windows. It'll give you accommodation information. It'll give you Q&A dates, all kinds of information. It's really good. I know most of the DACs that I talked to in the past have either downloaded it to their computer so they can access it easily, or they print it out so that they can keep an eye on it, and so that they don't miss deadlines like the accommodations window, which, you don't want to miss that, an opportunity for your student to test with all the accommodations they might need. Here's a picture of how to sign in to the Pearson Access Next. If you haven't gone in there yet, please do. Please try your password. Make sure you can get access. If not, then let me know. There's my login. So that's what that's going to look like. Your username is going to probably be, if you're a new DAC, your email address. A few of you have last name and a bunch of numbers. If you don't have that information, let me know. Okay. So this is what the homepage looks like. And it's broken down into setup, testing, reports. That sounds pretty straightforward. Setup is where you go in and look at your students. You can go and look at all the users that you have. You might have a tech person that you want access to PA Next. You might have a different test coordinator that you want to have access in PA Next so that they can help you through this jungle of things that you have to do. And testing, that would be where you can set up your online testing. And it gives you a few options. It's not big, not too difficult to do, but that's where you would set up your online testing. I can't even think of the name for it, but your session, sorry about that. And then reports. So that would be where you would find those reports that just recently came out. Okay, and then it does have over here on the right-hand side, if you cannot figure it out, go ahead and give me a call. Most of the time I can help you. There are a few things that I'm not able, that I don't have access to, or I don't have quite as much experiences as some of the techs do at ACT. So, but those you can call them as well. Right, and this is the CCRIS. Now this is the login page to the TAA, the Test and Accommodations and Accessibility platform, but it's also where you can order materials that directly your pre-ACT materials if your district is taking the pre-ACT, but also you can get here, you can get fee waivers, you can get posters for your school, you can get all kinds of materials, free materials from ACT. And so just wanted you to see what this looked like. This kind of changed from last year. And so if you've experienced it before, it doesn't look quite the same anymore. And okay, moving on. So online testing used for standard students. You can use it for all your students or some of your students, or as a makeup option. Most students with accommodations are able to test online. There are a few who can't, specifically large print and Braille. My recommendation would be to read the test administration manual and the technical manual. It seems like a lot. You might want to talk with your tech person and work on that with them. It's important that you understand the process if you're going to use it. Proctor caching is not mandatory. It has been in the past, but the ACT is choosing to not make it mandatory, but we strongly recommend that you do that, especially if you're testing more than a few students, like your makeup students. Any of the online testing, I strongly recommend doing the proctor caching, the mock administration, and the browser lockdown. And that is all in your technical manual and your test administration manual, how to do those things. If you have any questions about how to do those, let me know. But these are really essential to success. We want you to succeed on the online test. We don't want your kids to be in the middle of it and it not work, or you didn't realize your infrastructure wasn't going to hold it. We want success for your students, and we want success for you. So we recommend that you do those things. If you have a student who wants to take the test online and has an accommodation, those must be requested in TAA, or you can call the accommodations people and they will set that up for you. This is TestNav. I'm not sure if very many of you are aware of this, whether you have been a test coordinator before or done anything with the ACT. The TestNav is where you actually do online testing. But this is also where you can do practice tests. I can see underneath the sign in that says test audio, and then it says practice test. Practice tests, you do not have to sign in. You don't have to have a different login password for this. And practice tests are timed for you. So like for the student, you wouldn't have to necessarily be there to time it for them. The computer will do it itself. Really a great opportunity for kids to try some different questions for the online for the ACT practicing. And I know that practice helps most kids. TestNav has a different login. Your username may be the same, but it will be, the password will have to be different. It won't be the same as your PA Next, and TAA has a totally different login. So don't be too confused with that. ACT online prep and pre-ACT. These were options that we provided to the districts, and the superintendents were provided a survey this fall, as they were last year, and to choose one of the options for NDE to purchase for their district. If you don't know what your district choice is, what your superintendent chose, please contact me. I'm glad to share that with you. Option one was to do the ACT online prep. We call it AOP. And then each third-year cohort student will have that opportunity, that prep online. It's a computer system, and they can use an app on their phone, and they can practice all kinds of things. There's 2 full tests, 2 writing prompts. It's got a lot in there. And they can use that for 365 days from the first day they log in, okay? And then option 2 was the pre-ACT test. Each district could choose from a fall test window for the third-year cohort, mostly juniors, or their second-year cohort, mostly sophomores, or a spring test window was for the second-year cohort, obviously, because the third year is taking the ACT. So those were their options. ACT online prep will be available mid-October. If you need additional licenses, sometimes the numbers don't always adjust for additional students or kids who just moved in, that kind of thing. If you need anything, or you have additional instructors you want to add to that, please let me know. Like I said, the student logs in, they have access for 365 days. And I talked about practice tests and writing prompts. The writing prompts are AI scored, and you'll get that like within 24 hours. The score, it's kind of great, and the kids can really look at it and analyze why they got their score. It'll give them some information on that. Then there's 4 additional sample questions for each section, for the English, the math, the science, and the reading, and 3,000 practice questions. Pretty amazing stuff. New changes include updated course organization. So it's going to be a little easier to get courses in to set up, like if an instructor wanted to use that in the classroom to get their kids, it's a little easier to do that. There's a new study schedule for students. So once they've taken that test and it's verified where their score is at, where their weakness is at, it gives them some easier things an easier way to study, and it schedules them where you're headed, what you need to look at next, those kind of things. It has more test tips. It has a navigation menu, which is really helpful. In-app support, which we've never had before, which I think is exciting. And then course selection. So there's additional course selections been added to that too. Test dates for the pre-ACT. The pre-ACT is a test that is similar to the ACT and can predict what a student potentially will score on the ACT. The fall test window is October 1st to November 27th. That's the day before Thanksgiving break. So that works out pretty good. And then you should receive your score, your reports from ACT sometime in mid to late December. After that, if you test October 1st and your whole district is done testing, you can request from ACT to go ahead and do their report then, so you don't have to wait until December, so that you can utilize that information and hopefully help you with instruction, and whatever else you need to use that information for. The spring test window is March 2nd to April 24th, and they will send an email schedule of events in January. They've already sent out a schedule of events. I believe they've sent that out. If you don't have that, let me know. I will get that for you. I was told early September, but I think it's already been sent out. So let me know if you don't have that. If you're testing in the fall. It's, with the spring test, the same is true. If you test early in March or mid-March and you don't want to wait until May to get your results, you just need to let pre-ACT people know, and they will do your reports early. That's one of the things ACT has provided to us as a state. So, but if you have assistance with the pre-ACT, now I know some, but it might get me in trouble. So if you really have a tough question, I'd suggest you go ahead and call them or email them at their customer service at preact@act.org. Okay? That was the end. I'm done. How about that? 3 minutes early. How about that? So did I get any questions?
No, if anybody has any questions, if you type those into chat, that would be great. If not, we'll start to shuffle around and get the next person up to bat here. Not seeing any questions yet, Iris. You did a good job.
Well, you know where to find me, people.
Yeah, and like I said before, if you have questions on ACT, Iris is the person you want to go to. And if she doesn't know it, which is rare, she's going to find the answer for you or get you to somebody who will. So we appreciate her and being in our office. She's been a valuable asset to us.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, I think we're going to switch to a new topic. And good morning, I'm Rhonda True. I am the interim Nebraska NAEP coordinator. So all things NAEP, I am learning. So here we go. This is going to be a really high overview because I did hear Jeremy say earlier, kind of stole my thunder, that currently this is not a NAEP state year for testing. So currently we do not have any schools involved in NAEP this year. So I say currently because there are some international tests and sometimes some other samplings that they want to do. But currently right now, we are not this school year. No schools are involved in NAEP. So, but that being said, I will be reaching out to schools for next year, probably late spring, early summer. Okay, first of all, these are the 5 areas that hopefully high overview that questions that I will answer. And if you have others, please just chime in on the chat. So the first one is, what is NAEP? It is a national assessment of educational progress, and it is the largest nationally representative. And there are about 50,000 students in grades 4 and 8 that are involved in NAEP every year. And this is the nation's report card is where all the NAEP results are situated. And then we get a nation, we get compared to the nation. So every state's data is there. And then you can compare jurisdictions by state to see how we're doing as a state. You can also compare to the nation. So it is the largest. This talks about the nation's report card as a resource. And I guess what I would say is NAEP really is like a bell that helps us keep our focus on education. It motivates policymakers and elected officials to commit financial backing to provide quality education. And so the data that comes from NAEP is often looked at by policymakers. So how are scores reported? The good news is the scores are not reported at school level, student level, or at all tied to accountability. Students' identities are kept strictly confidential. The only data we get back is at the state level. And again, that's reported on the nation's report card by aggregate data. There's subgroup data there and contextual data. The contextual data that is provided, students respond to questions, survey kind of questionnaires on their assessments, maybe about their classroom, their experiences, things like that. So that's some of the contextual data that comes out. So basically, again, scores are only reported at the state level. So if you're part of the sample, not all students in grades 4 and 8 take it. I'll explain that in a minute. But if you're part of the sampling of schools, which are students within your building that are taking the assessment, just state data comes from it. Question that always comes out is participation required? And I put the slide up here because the United States Department of Education does require all states who receive Title I funding to participate in NAEP reading and math every 2 years at 4th and 8th grades. So you see here that it's the odd number years that the states, the sampling within the states are required. And again, no NAEP testing this year. That being said, results from last year will be coming out probably the end of October or November. So you'll probably see some of that come through in the press or even on the nation's report card. You will look to see how we did in 2019 as a state. So again, another point to that, also included in your NDE district application when you request Title I funding. So not even at the building level, it even goes higher than that. At the district level, if you're a larger district that has title schools and non-title schools, and you're asked to be part of the sampling and you're a non-title building, the district is still receiving the title funding. And so they're saying that they're receiving funding, so all schools would participate with that. There are some international studies that happen on the even year or odd years, no, even years, I get that mixed up. So these are some of the ones that at some point in time you might be asked to be a part of, or there might even be some new ones. This year, to be honest, the study that's happening this year is called the Long-Term Trend Study. So many states are participating in it. Nebraska just wasn't asked to be a part of that sampling this year. What is my role? My role, of course, is just to be a person who makes it easier for you at the school. So if you are selected to be a school with not all students, just some students in grades 4 and 8 that will participate, I'm here to help you make this a smooth transition to giving that test. And your teachers do not give the test. There's a NAEP team that actually comes into your building with the devices and the people who proctor and give it. So, and if that's you, when it's that point in time, if your school is selected to have a small sampling, I will talk with you further about that. But that's why I'm here, if you have questions or need help with it. This is a question that gets asked a lot. Why are some schools chosen more than others? I keep talking about it being a sampling. The sample group that is selected, depending on the test, it needs to be representative of, for example, the state. If we're looking for the state level results, then we choose a representative sample of the state. So therefore, if you have a given subgroup that is maybe chosen, that's larger, your school may be asked to participate more frequently. So people are like, well, it doesn't feel random to me. We keep getting asked to do it. But if you have a larger subgroup who's representative of what we see in our state, then you may be asked to participate a little more frequently. If it's a national study, then we're going to be looking for a representative sampling of that study, of it being more what that would look like. So it's called a representative sampling, not random. The other piece I want to talk about is just on the left is the inscat achievement levels, and I know Jeremy talked about those. On the right are the NAEP achievement levels, and you can see the big X. We do not want to compare them at all. If you see things for the state around NAEP and you see how many are basic or how many proficient, and you're like, well, that doesn't even match at all what our fourth graders are reading or doing on the inscat, because they aren't. It isn't the same scale. It isn't comparing the same thing. So we don't want to compare those at all.
Yeah, they didn't use the same information to,
Nope.
to set those achievement levels, right?
Nope.
So in our case, we brought in Nebraska educators. They looked at Nebraska results on our test to determine those levels. And then policymakers ultimately set the levels based on recommendation from teachers. Teachers probably came in for NAEP as well, but they used different information to set those levels. So they're not set in the same way and are not directly comparable.
Nope. Good point. What can you do as a DAC to support NAEP? Just where NAEP is concerned, be positive, remind principals and school coordinators to complete their tasks if they are selected school. And then just during the even number years, if I give a call, just remember NAEP is optional and communicate to schools if you're the principal or whatever. It is optional in even years. And schools do not have to participate. And it's not required in the even numbered years. So my feelings will not be hurt at all. If I call and you say, nope, we're not going to participate, that is your choice. Jeremy talked about the website. So here is the statewide assessment landing page. And on the left, there's more information here about NAEP. So you can see the places. The Nebraska NAEP snapshot is there, and that's the 2017 results. Once I have the 2019, I'll post them there. So you can get a quick overview of grade 4, grade 8 in reading and math. And if you want to go to the nation's report card, when you get in the weeds here on the NAEP page, there is a link to the nation's report card. And that's it for NAEP. So I don't know if there are any questions on chat. If not, I'm gonna pause for a moment and then move to the next topic, which is skills.
No, don't see any questions yet.
No questions, no clapping, no NAEP. Oh, sorry.
They're all on mute.
Okay, no emojis for clapping. Okay, so there's my contact information at the State Department here if you need to get a hold of me about NAEP. All right, I am also the Enhanced Education Grant Specialist, and Jeremy talked a little bit about this at the beginning if you were still on. This grant is called SKILLS, not spelled incorrectly, spelled for the acronym, as you can see. And this grant mainly focuses on science assessment, and I'm going to walk through it at a very high level, provide you with extra slides so you can dig in more deeply later, and go from there. Okay, so here's about SKILLS. It's one of 2 grants that were funded, enhanced assessment grants, back in 2016. It is a collaborative partnership. We have Montana, Wyoming, and 10 expert panel members, as well as other groups I'll show you here in a minute. We have a 4-year timeline, and so the grant started, funded, and will end in 2020. Nebraska is the lead state, by the way. Here's the 2 main goals, and I love these goals because it's all about a shared knowledge base among stakeholders and learning a process, which is the principal design approach to creating quality science assessments. And when I say quality in the sense that we get meaningful and useful scores. And then on the right, the second goal there on the right is just we want a way to connect statewide assessment with local assessment results. And we want this to be a coherent system so that it's teaching, learning, and instruction, and it's coherent and it's standard-based. So here's the kind of the org chart of what it looks like for all the groups that are working on the grant. And you can see Nebraska's the lead. And then EdCount is our primary vendor there that's really supporting and helping with ACS Ventures and SRI. Montana and Wyoming are also, like I said, partner states. And then we have expert panelists over there who have been involved in science, assessment, and in principal design that give us a lot of feedback on all the deliverables and things that we have done through the grant. Okay, so let's look at some of the deliverables. Well, year one is passed, but we've created a website, and I'm going to talk about some of these again at a high level. We create a theory of action for Nebraska science, as well as for the grant. And whenever we come up with a deliverable or a product that anybody in a district or state can use, we always write a white paper on the process, because as many of you know, you get a product, and if you don't understand the how and the why, but how to use it, it's not as helpful and it won't create as meaningful work for you. So there's always a paper that goes with it to explain things. We've done a theory of action. We've created some self-evaluation tools on looking at your assessment systems. And now we are working on assessment. We've completed our assessment literacy module suite, and I want to talk about those and our claims. Year two, there's the other pieces. We've got a whole large-scale assessment suite of materials that are already posted on our website, which are free to everyone to use. And we are in our classroom work right now, and we have teachers piloting and working on tasks, science tasks right now, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Year three, continuing with our classroom-based assessment resources. We want resources for teachers on how do I write these science assessment tasks so that I make sure when I get done, whatever kids are producing will let me know what they know and can do so that they're reliable and valuable and valid. And then we're continuing to work on large scale. And then year four is all just about dissemination, making sure everything is out there, coming to our states and on our website, and going across the nation really and just sharing what we have. Okay, I really love this graphic. We just created this for the grant. Really, when you think about kids, you know, student learning in relation to goals and expectations, that's what it's all about. It's at the center of the key. And then there's different times we tap in to see what kids know and can do. And that's during formative assessment times, interim, and then we have annual or statewide assessment kind of pieces as well. So with this key in mind, then the grant has all of these products that we have developed, and you can see they're color-coded to what part of assessment they're tapping into and what the purpose is of each of them. So you may not be able to, hopefully you can read it on your screen, but if not, it's a great tool to look back and see what are we interested in, what is something there that may help us with either assessment or science assessment. Now I'm going to talk about a couple of these at a really high level. I talked about the theory of action. This is the science assessment theory of action that we created in Nebraska. And we aligned it to our tenets. These are the outcomes that we brought in stakeholders to help us come up with our theory of action and get input and feedback. This is what we want for kids for science education in Nebraska. And I'm not going to read those to you, but let you just look over them. You can see educators are a huge piece of this. We have our workforce here, getting our kids ready for that. We have students at the center, making sure all students have access to our three-dimensional standards. So all of those pieces working together. The next piece I want to talk about is our local and state self-evaluation protocols. And these protocols we have developed for the local and the district, and we've also developed one for the state. And what these protocols do is they help you look at your system of assessment. So in a protocol, you would bring a team together, possibly your assessment team, your leadership team, and you might say, and we had some districts do this, and I'll give kudos to them in a minute, we had them look at their science assessment system, K-12. And they went through these steps. What are our current plan needs? What are all the assessments we're currently giving? What evidence do we get from each of these assessments that tell us what kids can do? And then they review the evidence that they get across assessments. So here's the four, they're gathering and evaluating validity evidence. So here's the four fundamental validity questions that they're asking when they're going through each of the assessments that they have identified are happening in their district or in their school, if you want to break it to a smaller level. So I'll give you just a moment to read through some of those. And as our districts worked, they really talked about, wow, digging in to go for construct coherence. Is that assessment really measuring what it says it's doing? And so forth. So you can see the questions that you ask, and there's templates that you fill out to get to the answers to these questions, as well as examples of where would I find the evidence for that to answer that question. We did have 2 districts in Nebraska participate. I think we had 3 in Wyoming and 2 more in Montana using these protocols and giving us feedback. And then we went back in and made edits to them. And so Adams Central, in the middle of the state, right around Hastings, and Hemingford Public Schools both participated in going through the protocol with their science assessment systems, giving us feedback on how friendly was it usable, did it give you information that you needed. What we learned from those 2 districts and the others in Montana and Wyoming is we still need to build and increase the capacity for assessment literacy in our districts. And the teams were like, we need more background on some of these things. Some of those validity questions you asked us, we're not even sure, like, how do we find that evidence? And so we developed a digital workbook that goes with each one of those validity questions that you saw earlier. So really, this is like a suite. Like, you have the protocol and you have the digital workbook that goes right along with it, which is a PowerPoint with voiceover. So you could break this into chunks as a team and watch the digital workbook and listen, and it will give you examples and ideas of where to go get the evidence, and then you could complete the actual protocol itself. So they really go together, and we got that idea from our districts. So again, it has 5 modules. The first module was an overview, and then the other 4 modules take each of those questions I shared with you earlier. Here's who might want to be on your team if you're going to take an assessment system. It could be ELA or math, for that matter. This is a generic protocol. We just use science to coordinate with the grant. And that's who might be on your team and how to kind of go about doing this. There's the digital workbook series overview. And so you can see chapter 1 is that overview, 2 is construct coherence, 3 comparability, 4 is accessibility and fairness, and 5 is consequences. And so this is on the skills website, which I'll share in a little bit. We are also putting all of these in the OER hub. We've started, and those will be in the Nebraska OER hub as well. Here's how you access the workbook directly. That'll take you right to all of our resources on this link. Okay, now comes my passion, because my passion is the classroom. So we also created tools for the principal design process for developing science tasks. We did this at the state level, which is in the middle column, and then we've created tools for the classroom. So there are 4 phases in principal design, and you can see those on the far left. And then the tools we've created, whether it be state or classroom. I've grayed out the classroom box column because I'm going to talk to you about this process at the classroom level. So we had teachers from Nebraska, Wyoming, and Montana come in, 5th, 8th, and high school teachers last summer, and we taught them the evidence-centered design process to develop science classroom tasks. Those teachers now are going to take those tasks out using that process, and they're going to pilot them this school year and give us feedback, because they will get the evidence from kids and annotate, did that answer did that process work to get the results that they said that they should get from that? Because we want this process to be something that you think about, go through ahead of time, and before you create your task, so that you guarantee yourself, or more guarantee yourself, that you're getting the evidence that you want from kids. So the tasks will be piloted. I'm also going to be doing a presentation at NATS on September 20th about this process. And we are going to have a pop-up conference, either late fall or early winter, to do a more detailed overview of the principal design process to develop science tasks.
Yeah, so just jump in here a little bit and really endorse this. So Rhonda, along with the skills people, did some work this summer with Nebraska educators, and they really felt the feedback from it was really great. They really felt like it helped them figure out the types of tasks that they would write for their classroom to get information on these new three-dimensional standards that really focused on the instructional shifts that need to be made and focus on the changes in science education that the new standards really call for. And so Rhonda doesn't have nearly enough time to really talk about this, but other science teachers, other people going and seeing some of these presentations, getting involved in this, I think would be very beneficial for you and your district as we move forward. And I think this type of work would definitely help make sure students are prepared for the assessments that we'll see, summative assessments we'll see for inscat science. So.
Yeah, and that being said, Jeremy, what I did hear from teachers after we presented was someone finally gave us a process on how to do it, because they have seen other science assessments and we're getting really better. Science teachers are already evaluating them using a lot of rubrics, but some of them were like, I didn't know where to start to make sure also that how do I pull in all three dimensions? So yeah, I would agree. Very important. I also put a link here to our science transition webpage. Jeremy showed you the website. But there is a skills tab there, as well as a lot of other science resources you might want to point your science teachers to, but I have a link to the skills work there as well. What are the benefits? Well, there are a lot. Jeremy just highlighted them. We're using some of the pieces that we're learning from this process as well for statewide assessment here at Nebraska. So the state and local, we're all benefiting from this work, as well as we're sharing this with the nation. So, and what I love most is we're getting input from educators across the states to develop, as well as our expert panelists to come in and give us feedback as well. So that's a little bit about skills. I'm going to say what Jeremy said. I do feel it's a strong, lots of strong resources there, whether you're looking for assessment literacy resources to look at a system or of assessments, or if you're really trying to dig into classroom assessments, a task for science. So I think that was it for me. I don't know if there are any other questions.
Yeah, do we have any other questions about skills or about Nate? Give it just a second while we switch people around here. See if anything comes over the chat.
Excuse me. Rhonda, you mentioned the OER hub.
Yes.
You might want to explain just a bit about what that is.
The OER hub is an open educational resource. So I call it's a hub because it's a place that's open, it's free, and it has educational resources from multiple states. We also have a Nebraska OER hub where when items come in, they're being vetted by our teachers and then aligned to standards and then approved at the state level, depending on content. And so that's a place where teachers can go to look for resources, additional resources. If you go to the science transition page, you could type in Nebraska OER and get there. But if you go to the Nebraska statewide assessment science transition page, I actually have a link there a PowerPoint on how to access it, because I always have difficulty accessing different sites. And so I'm like, could you tell me the steps? So there's a PowerPoint on how to access the OER Hub. So you could even just send that out even to your teachers, as well as you could utilize it. So it's a great resource, and we will keep updating and putting things there. Doran Avey is the director here that works with that. She goes out and does a lot of presentations. She will also be at NATS. So if you have teachers of science or math going, Doran's going to talk about it, Doran Avey, and she will also do other presentations across the state. Thanks for that, Trudy.
Okay. We're going to go ahead and switch to ELPA 21, and Allison Olson is going to talk to you about that.
All right, thank you, Jeremy. So as Jeremy mentioned, my name is Allison Olson. I am the Title III Director and ELPA 21 Coordinator for the department. For those of you who may not be familiar with ELPA 21, it is a test that's designed to measure the English learning of English learners. And so the test was developed aligned to the Nebraska ELP standards, which are in turn aligned to the College and Career Readiness standards. And the test itself tests 4 different language domains: listening, reading, writing, and speaking. If you are familiar with the ELPA 21 summative and you've administered that in the past, one change that I would like to point out this year is that there will no longer be a paper pencil writing supplement for K1 students. All testing will occur online, and I know that the ELPA 21 psychometricians have gone through to make sure that the test remains valid and reliable. This should simplify the process, and it will shorten the time required just a little bit. One quick note, I want to just make sure to mention that there is still a paper pencil option for students who need that. It's pretty rare, and that has to be requested in advance. It's actually not a great option, as the test was developed to be online, and so it's you lose something in the translation to paper pencil, but once in a while we have students that for one reason or another, maybe students coming from, they might be a newcomer with extreme limited experience with technology, or may have a disability that requires them to take a paper pencil. And so that option is still there. It can be requested. Most of our students will not need it. Another change that's coming this year is the online reporting system will be replaced by what's called the Airways reporting system. It is a little bit more user-friendly. I think that our users are really going to like some of the enhanced features, and I will go through those in just a minute. If you'd like to mark on your calendars, the ELPA 21 summative window begins on February 3rd, and that runs through March 13th. During that window, we expect that all K through 12 students in Nebraska who are identified as English learners will take the ELPA 21 summative. The testing vendor remains AIR, and everything that you would need to administer the ELPA 21, both the screener and summative, are on the AIR portal. The link is here, and it is also linked from the Department of Ed website. Some of the resources that are listed there's user guides and manuals. If you prefer to see a more visual format, there are webinars that go along with all of them. The test directions have been translated into several directions. One very important instructional resource that's available on the portal is the achievement level descriptors, and that really breaks down what students at every level are able to do and expected to do, and also what their next level of learning would be for all 4 domains. In addition, there is information specifically to the technology required to administer either assessment. And I think we have a visual of what the home screen of the AIR portal looks like. If you have not signed up for email updates and you are the DAC, I would encourage you to do that. If you go to the portal in the upper right corner, you will see a place where you can enter your email, and that way you'll be notified when there are updates or changes that are made. Most DACs have been added as district level users in TIDE. As the DAC, you can add additional users for your district, school, or test administrator levels. If you're a new DAC and if you have any difficulty contacting or accessing the site, please contact me, Allison Olson, at the Department of Education, and make sure that the assessment office has been notified of any DAC changes. Following the upload of the testing label data, which should happen about mid-January, we'll get you a date as the date gets closer. Students will then be loaded into the TIDE system for testing. Any students who are new to your district after that date will be manually added. You use the TIDE system to establish settings and accommodations, and also to create appeals if there are any difficulties with the testing software. A little bit more about the Airways reporting system. It's, first of all, we expect that it will be available in late September. It's more user-friendly. You can really drill down from the district level, school level, to the classroom level. One of the features that will be included is to identify the 5 items with the highest and lowest scores. Teachers will have the ability to see actual student work along with the item. And the user guides will be provided soon, so you'll get a chance to look at that in advance. As we're making that transition, it is important to note that all of the historical ELPA 21 summative scores will be uploaded into the Airways reporting system. The ELPA 21 screeners for the current school year and last year, the 18-19 school year, will also be uploaded. If there are any districts who would like to retain information from the 2017-18 administration of the screener, you do need to download those. They're available through October 31st. After that date, they will not be available to you. So that information has been sent out. It is on the AIR portal, and I wanted to reiterate it here. As in the past, we anticipate that the summative results of the ELPA 21 will be available the first week in May. Districts will be provided with a district data file as well as individual student reports. The reports will indicate the overall proficiency determination, whether a student is emerging, progressing, or proficient. And it will have language domain scores ranging from 1 to 5. 5 is the highest for each of the 4 domains. Students who score in the 4s and 5s for all domains would be considered proficient, any combination thereof. We have many districts who are using the ELPA 21 dynamic screener. That is an option that's provided to all Nebraska school districts by the Nebraska Department of Education. The use of the ELPA 21 screener is optional. If you choose to use your own screener, that is an option. It does have to meet the criteria that are set out in Rule 15. The ELPA 21 dynamic screener has a lot of similarities. It uses the same platform as the summative assessment. The resources and manuals to administer that are also available on the AIR portal. And within the TIDE system and currently the online reporting system, the ORS, you can access student data for both the screener and previous administrations of the summative. Once that transition to the Airways system takes place, the end of September, the online reporting system will be going away at the end of October. One difference that occurs between the screener and the summative, the dynamic screener is one assessment. So all 4 domains are rolled into the screener. When you start the assessment, there is a stopping point where the test administrator will make a determination whether or not the student will be able to continue with the screener, whether the student will continue with help. Generally, that help is in the form of using the technology And then the test administrator scores the first speaking question with a rubric that's provided on the AIR portal. That's a pretty quick overview of the ELPA 21, just a couple of changes coming this year. If you do have any questions or want any more information, I've included my contact information. Do we have any questions that came in about that one, Jeremy?
No, nothing's come up on chat about ELPA 21. So now we're ready to open it up for general questions and answers. You can either type those into chat or take yourself off of mute or raise your hand and I can take you off of mute. And we'll try to answer any additional questions that we have. Give you a little bit of time here. Okay, still not seeing any questions. I want to make sure we give plenty of wait time just in case somebody's typing something in. As we're waiting, a couple of reminders. So like I said, we are recording this. We'll get the recording posted and the PowerPoints posted as soon as possible. Then we'll send out a DAC email so that everybody knows that those have been updated and are available. Whether if you want to go back and check something or whatever the case may be. As always, the biggest thing that I can't stress enough is if you need help with something, please contact us and let us know. If you have questions, let us know. We are always open to those questions, and we want to help you, and we want to be a resource for you. Please pay attention to the emails that go out and those types of things. And if we all kind of work together, it'll be a successful year. I'm still not seeing any questions. So I think with that, we will sign off and everybody have a good day. I really appreciate you joining us today. The new DACs that we're on, I hope you have a good year and everything runs smoothly for you. Experienced DACs that we're on, thanks for joining us today too. We always appreciate everyone's hard work at making this successful. So thank you, and we'll sign off.